Puppet Combo. You may have heard this name before. It's responsible for many of the horrifying PSX games we've gotten to play over the years. Puppet Combo is known for creating short games inspired by B-horror movies, and my is it effective. Combining both B-horror movies and an old-school visual aesthetics, and you've got yourself a terrifying experience. Welcome to my new review series. We're going to be taking a look at some of my favorite indie horror titles, starting with the scariest one I've ever played, Drill Massacre. Everyone, welcome to the review Rim. It's time to grab our flashlight and go down the sugar tunnel. Drill Massacre would be the first game I've ever played from Puppet Combo, and with it, my introduction to the world of PSX-like horror games. It was genuinely the scariest thing I've played at the time, and having to replay it for the review made me feel at unease. I've been putting this off long enough. You know I love you guys. So it's time to take one for the team and take my first step into Drill Massacre. Not before I finish writing my will, that is. The title screen alone is enough for me already. Right out of the bat, this strange figure is staring directly at me, and beside him is his trusty tool, a power drill. You'll find these a lot throughout Puppet Combo games, as if each one is its own B-horror movie, with either the slasher or his weapon of choice in the cover. In this one we get both, and it's plenty effective. The game starts with a serene view of the sunset over the horizon while hearing someone playing with the radio. Only to be caught with the screams of someone having an accident. After just barely surviving the crash, we take control of Megan, our main character. We figure out that our friend Jeff wasn't as lucky. Very quickly we're put in a nightmare scenario where our friend is gravely wounded and we're lost in the middle of nowhere. The only thing left to do is to grab our flashlight from the back of the car, which we dedicated the entire trunk to apparently, and set foot in the forest to look for anyone who may aid us. Despite the overwhelming intro, we're treated to the calming sounds you find in the forest and a nice view of the sunset. Don't let the soothing nature sounds and the wind blowing at the side of the mountain fool you. This is just the silence before the storm. Further up the mountain, we come across a lumber factory. It doesn't look completely abandoned at first glance, as we see a mysterious figure on the balcony watching over us. From a quick look around though, it doesn't take much to figure out that this place is in fact abandoned. And the tone of the entire area just screams, run while you still can. But desperate times require desperate measures, and we decide to pursue the strange figure into the factory. After making our way inside, we're met with one of my favorite horror tropes in video games of all times. And very quickly, the objective changed from getting into the factory to getting the hell out. This is where the game actually starts, as now we're no longer safe from the horrors that lurk around. I guess now would be a good time to mention that the character feels sluggish and is bound to tank controls, so making precise movement is out of the question. To top it all off, the mouse sensitivity is set to very high on default with no option to change, so if you were to flick your mouse accidentally for whatever mysterious reason, you'd lose control of the camera. To make matters worse, turning while running is clunky and slow as hell. The gameplay mostly consists of investigating your surroundings in a slow fashion. You gotta pay attention real close, as you can find items to help you just about anywhere. You could find a key inside a toilet, which is another horror trope from video games to check off my list, and various newspaper articles that shed some light on this rundown place. Close to the entrance, you can find a room with a piece reporting about 2 other campers that mysteriously vanished in this area. A very reassuring news piece to read while you're lost in an abandoned factory. Apart from the worrying article, the atmosphere here also puts me on edge. It feels like I'm about to get jumped on at any moment. A big factor in the atmosphere of the game is the ambience. Scaling up the mountain, you'll hear birds, crickets, and wind howling in the mountainside. And just like you've imagined, the ambience in an abandoned factory is terrifying. The place itself is very quiet, so any small movement or sound is just bound to trigger something from you. I've mentioned you can find a key in a toilet. It's not the only place you'll find items, as the game features RNG for where keys spawn. Finding them is your objective, as they're the ticket out of this hole. Past the sugar tunnel, you'll find a side room with stairs. Upstairs, you'll find a room that requires blue, green, and red keys to unlock. From my experience with the game so far, there's generally 2 keys in the main area, while the third one rests in the lower section, which you can find in the side room downstairs. You have an abundance of places to investigate: wrecked offices, destroyed toilets, flooded machinery with unknown chemicals, and this thing I would like to forget exists. You'll have to search all around these places if you'd like to get out. Except the sugar tunnel. It has a special place in hell. Finding 3 keys sounds simple enough, but... You'll have to deal with that if you'd like to find them. I cannot describe the amount of stress this encounter instilled in me. A man with a power drill of all things is out to get you. I've always found that concept eerily terrifying. There is someone with a power drill watching you from the dark, and when the moment is just right, he jumps out. The slasher will keep tabs of your location using these metal doors, which can be found all around the abandoned factory. It's mostly how he gets around. This makes the menu screen just that much more fitting, as you're always being watched by this eerie figure. Usually before getting jumped at, you'll hear him running. This is incredibly horrifying, especially if you've entered a room, as you can't pinpoint exactly where he's coming from. A point of advice for me is try and listen out what the killer is stepping on. This one time I was searching the lower section of the factory, I came across a large room that was flooded. Sometime later, I've started to hear fast footsteps approaching. I was able to pinpoint the killer's route as I heard him running at first, and then it was quickly followed with wet footsteps. So I knew immediately where he was coming from and ran to the other way. The chases are very intense. Unlike most horror games, this one does not feature any hiding mechanics. And to make sure you're in absolute panic mode, the screen flashes whenever you're in a chase, accompanied with very loud screams. The flashing on the screen intensifies as the killer gets closer and closer with his power drill, and if he manages to tag you with it even once, the screen will get obscured with blood, making it even harder to see where you're running to. This has a snowball effect, as if you get stuck and he managed to tag you again, it gets incredibly harder to see anything. The only way to make it out alive is to outrun the killer. You can do so by trying to shake him off, or survive long enough until he gives up. That task is made difficult as a big guy chasing you around with a power drill is not your only problem. You're going to be fighting with the controls a lot during chases. Oftentimes you'll miss a doorway and get stuck on a wall. Some areas have multiple sharp turns, which is impossible to navigate with tank controls in a timely manner. You also get the option to strafe left to right, so if some of the turns are too sharp, you may want to use those instead. If you do happen to miss a doorway, instead of turning mid-chase, you can strafe to sidestep your way out of the room. The only way you actually die in a chase is if you run into the killer by accident or get stuck on a wall, so pay close attention to the routes you're taking and where the killer is coming from. I've mentioned before you can pinpoint the slasher's exact location if you listen out. Sometimes it's hard to know where he is coming from if the surfaces he's stepping on are the same throughout the area. However, sometimes before he starts jolting at you, you'll hear a metal door open. And if you had a good look around beforehand, you could recognize which door was near and figure out which route he's taking. You may want to steer clear of these doors too. He can come out of them at any given moment, and if you happen to be near them, you'll have no time to react and he'll get some nasty scares off. For me, I found that the best way to shake off the slasher is by kiting him around. You'll be able to do so if you take sharp turns and keep close to the wall. If you take a turn sharp enough, the slasher will run headfirst into the doorframe and take a few moments to catch up. You can't chase the killer either. I learned that the hard way. If you were chased and got to a door, the chase would resume with the killer entering through the door after you. I know I've harped on this point already, but this game nails the atmosphere. The silence of the factory and how every small sound is made that much more significant and sends you off jumping. You're always stuck thinking, is that sound something I should worry about? And leave you guessing. Puppet Combo knows this very well, and oftentimes you'll hear these rare sounds you've never heard before. It gives off this feeling like the game is playing with you. And eventually, that silence turns into a quick set of footsteps getting closer and closer to your location, followed with the ravings of a power drill and screams as you scramble to run for your life. These fast and intense chases fits well with a newspaper clipping you'll find around the factory. Next to the broken down machinery in the main area, you'll find an office with a clipping suggesting more than 2 campers went missing. The paper describes the disappearances of 12 campers that got lost in the area, as if they were just ripped out of their camps, which fits very well with the nature of this killer's method of quickly striking out of the blue at any given moment. Another news clipping can be found in the lower section. The article is about a father pleading to police to find his missing daughter that mysteriously disappeared while they were out camping, claiming she was kidnapped. I didn't think much of these articles as we've seen a bunch of them scattered around. I just thought it was another unfortunate victim. However, later during my playthrough, I saw a small girl running away. This really drove home how real this scenario all of a sudden became, as I saw ghosts of victims running away, which most likely were their final moments. That realization hit me and just brought these missing campers from the note to life. In addition, I saw a man running away from me once. I assume at first it's just the killer playing one of his nasty little games with me, but later realized it's the ghost of Mason C. Sargent, which we read about in the news clipping near the entrance. Seeing their final moments as they're running away makes me realize I might be next if I don't get out of here, and might end up in a news clipping hidden in the factory for some unfortunate soul to find as they wander into this place. Some of the scares sometimes get ruined as the game runs into problems many Unity horror games do. When an object is loaded in or destroyed, the game will sometimes stutter. The stutter is very noticeable, but there is very little of them present. Personally, I don't mind the stuttering, but once you've played enough horror games, you learn that these act as a sign of warning. Like I mentioned before, these stutters occur when there is some loading going on. Oftentimes, the game will spawn in the bad guy, which will cause the game to stutter, so every time I see stuttering, I get a heads up that I'm about to be in danger. And similarly, if I get a stutter after shaking off the killer, I know he definitely left. Though these issues do not occur often, I do find it troublesome as it ruins the atmosphere for me. If the bad guy is about to chase me, I would like to figure it out myself rather than get a warning. If I just finish running away from the bad guy or seen a ghost run across somewhere, again, I'd like to figure it out for myself. I'm going to give you a heads up as we're about to step into nerd territory, which means I'm a nerd and I talk about nerdy things. The stuttering issue in Unity oftentimes can be solved by loading all the game objects you need when you initialize the scene, or in simple terms, when you load a level. Of course, loading in the killer as soon as the game starts can cause some problems if it's not doing anything, so generally what you do is place the game objects at the side of the player and set them to act on a specific trigger, and once the game object is done, you can simply place it out of the view of the player again or disable the game's object's components. Aside from that, I don't have much to complain about. These were really my only grievances with the game. On a side note, I don't think I've ever been this scared playing a game before since I started playing horror titles. I think that's due to the fact I wasn't recording myself or talking to a microphone, as all the gameplay you're watching is me silently sitting in a room. Not having to worry about anything else let me focus all my attention on the experience, and generally having a camera on me with a microphone makes me feel like I'm playing with somebody. It's why I started this channel, in fact, to be able to share my experiences with someone else while playing a game. Without those things, it makes me feel truly alone, which is why I think the experience was that much more terrifying than I thought it was going to be. I don't remember being scared out of my mind when I played it on the channel, but at the time this game was new experience for me, and to top it all off, I was incredibly lucky to beat the game on my first try. The killer just never spawned in my old playthrough. I can't stress enough how scared I was during my time with this game. I found myself incredibly jumpy every time I heard a sound that didn't fit in with the ambience. I was constantly looking around and worried about where I might run into the guy with a drill, and you could imagine my reaction when I heard a quick set of footsteps followed by ravings of a power drill while looking around. If you've been following my channel for some time, you may know that my biggest fear is being chased, so having an entire horror game based around that concept is just a nightmare for me. If you watched a few of my videos, you might find that a bit hard to believe, as I play these sorts of games all the time. Generally, other games fall flat in the scaring department as they fail to make you feel like you're actually being chased. Some games have monsters that aimlessly chase you around, while others have a short-term memory and forget to which game they belong once you get underneath a table or jump into a closet mid-chase. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying hiding spots make a game not scary or bad, but they tend to make the game easier, and once you jump into a hiding spot, they make for an easy way to track your pursuer as they make it very obvious where they're going next. One of the things that make these slashers scary is their location for the most part is unknown, and that element of surprise is a strong tool for the game to keep you on your feet, as you're constantly caught wondering where he might be hiding now. I could take a look at other games from Puppet Combo that utilize hiding spots effectively and talk about them. Definitely let me know if you want that sort of thing next in the series. The chase and atmosphere are the bread and butter of this horror gem. What I love about it most is the sense of impending doom around every corner. With the absence of hiding spots, any situation can turn dire within seconds, without a quick way out of a chase if you're caught up in one. The developer Puppet Combo knows this all too well, as I've mentioned before. To prevent players from feeling safe around transition screens, the killer will resume chase if you were to go through one, and it is horrifying. Sometimes the killer won't even follow you through the doorway, and instead use one of his metal side doors, and running towards the killer is the absolute worst case scenario, which I also learned the hard way. Speaking of these metal doors, you can actually find their origin if you go to a side room in the sugar tunnel. Before we go any further, I'm gonna throw a spoiler warning on the screen in case you want to experience the terror for yourself. I mean, if you're scared, you can continue watching, I guess. Good, so now you've definitely watched the game and not gonna watch this bit to figure out the endings because you're too scared or something, right? Good, we can go ahead. The game has you out and about looking for keys, which I've mentioned before are for a single door you can find up the stairs. However, it's not the only way out. You might have guessed it by now. If for some reason you thought wandering into the sugar tunnel was a great idea, then what you find there might be fitting for someone with such brilliant ideas. Further down the sugar tunnel, you'll find a side room with a narrow pathway. Continue down the pathway and you'll soon realize these are the tunnels the slasher used to get around the factory. If you were unfortunate enough to hear footsteps before going into the tunnel, then you'll be in for a ride of your lifetime as you scramble to find your way around a labyrinth of narrow pathways, with the delight feeling that comes with being chased. There is no better feeling when running into a dead end to realize you can't get out if it catches up with you. It is truly magical. And terrifying at the same time. Unlike the rest of the factory, you're always in for a treat when you wander into the sugar tunnel, no pun intended, as the slasher will always come for you when you stroll into the side room, and will always chase you across at a certain point. Not to mention, he can also come for you on your first few steps into the narrow tunnels, so you're still left guessing where he might be. And these tunnels stretch for quite a while, and there's so many turns, you really just have to power through them if you were to be chased down here. If you somehow manage to push through, you'll find a room with no way out that seems like it doesn't belong in the factory. It doesn't take much to figure out this room is actually where the killer resides, and you just ran right into his den. Moments later, you're greeted with this terrifying scene. The timeout in the cage is so you could sit and realize how much of a bad idea wandering into the sugar tunnel was. The timeout proceeds with a small touch of power drill to the face. You get a Bible verse when you die for good measure. You'll see a bunch of religious mentions in Puppet Combo games, which really just end up confusing me more than being scary. This is considered the bad ending, but I'm unsure if the other one is any better. While learning our lesson and staying out of the sugar tunnel this time, we get to see more interesting places which I've mentioned before. With a good look around, eventually you're bound to run into the red, green, and blue keys. Don't forget you have to get back alive to the door that requires the different colored keys. And if you do, you can finally start making your way out. Instead of being greeted with the sound of calming woods outside, you end up in an eerily long hall with no end in sight. Further down the hall, you can see a glimpse of a figure in the distance. This time, we're actually able to get close to the figure. Aside from the confusion of how long the hall is, you can't interact with the little girl. And to add more to the confusion, the girl mimics your movement. If you were to stop, she would too. If you were to walk, she would follow suit. It's not long before we meet our friendly repair guy that came to fix our camera and face for us. We politely refuse his offer and proceed to run for our life. The slasher insists on doing the fix free of charge, and what you end up is the longest chase sequence in all of horror games history. After some time, you reach the end of the corridor, and we're left with this eerie but somber scene.
Thing.
In local news, police believe to have found the remains of Jeff West after uncovering a wrecked vehicle off of Route 447. West and Megan Brooke of Montclair, New Jersey have been missing since May. Brooke's body has not been discovered. News at 11.
Au quotidien, c'est sur Terre où...
Along the somber scene, we hear a news report on the radio. The beginning says that Jeff's remains were found in a crash, which means Megan never was able to call for help. The report proceeds to reveal the unfortunate news that Megan Brooks was never found, and all that remains are these strange moans of the killer howling to the moon. I don't know what actually happened with Megan, but I think she met with the same fate like the other campers that went missing. It looked like she was not the only person, as we did see the little girl mentioned from the notes walking down the hall. Maybe other missing campers were around one of the many doors we saw in that hallway, which is a strange thing to find in a factory. When the killer jumps in the hallway, he hits Megan with the power drill, so even if we were to escape, she wouldn't make it far. And this marks the unfortunate story of Megan Brooks. What was originally a short experience ended up being an impactful one. Simply put, I love this game and what it does. I was terrified through and through. I was so tense while playing the game that my heart was beating so hard when I realized I'm about to find all the keys. And when I unlocked the door and got to the ending, I got a huge sense of relief, which speaks volumes on how much stress I was under to begin with. What I played in this review is just a demo despite being out for a few years now. I've heard from the Puppet Man himself that he intends on looking into creating a full version. It could be sometime this year, but he doesn't want to make any promises. So maybe my nightmare isn't over after all, and maybe it's not the end of the story for Megan Brooks. If we ever hear from her again, only time will tell, but man did I enjoy every bit of this game. It always had me on edge and made me realize how effective horror games can be. With a clunky control scheme and a relentless slasher with some good and effective sound design, you end up with one of the most amazing experiences that is absolutely worth trying for any horror fan out there. My recommendation is don't skip this one. Despite being a demo and quite short, it will provide enough scares to keep you up at night. You can get the game on itch.io. It's still a demo though, so if you'd like to wait for a sale or get it along with a bunch of other Puppet Combo titles in a bundle sale, I'd understand. This won't be the last time we talk about Puppet Combo, as I'm going to be reviewing another one of his games very soon. I'm truly excited to finally have my own review series to look at some of my favorite horror titles with a critical eye, and you better strap on, as we're going on for a ride to review some of the best indie horror titles, and this is just the beginning. Thank you very much for watching the first review RIM video. Let me know if you'd like to see more reviews like this by leaving a like on the video. If you'd like to support these reviews that I do, check out my Patreon on the screen right now or in the link in the description. And I'll catch you guys in my other videos. Bye!